awakening is about the discovery of consciousness without limits, of a self without limits. It's the discovery that what we are is much vaster than our mind can contain. So if we're attached to a small little story of self, that I'm this and I'm not that, I'm this and I'm not that, and that's like what we're invested in maintaining, there's no room and there's no way for us to really open to and let go into the enormity of the super consciousness that is our true nature.
Welcome to Meditation Changes Everything with spiritual teacher Craig Hamilton, a podcast exploring the deeper potentials of meditation practice and how it can change every aspect of human life. This episode is the first in our series exploring the most common obstacles to deep meditation and how we can move beyond them. Today, Craig dives into what is widely considered to be the greatest obstacle on the spiritual path: the human ego. We've all heard that having a healthy, strong ego is essential for living a productive, fulfilling life. So why then does the ego get such a bad rap when it comes to our spiritual path? Over the next 50 minutes, Craig illuminates the many ways in which the ego blocks our access to deep meditation and spiritual growth, and how we can stop it from holding us back. He offers practical tips to help you move past this challenge and experience the powerful presence and openness that meditation offers. We hope you enjoy the show. Here's Craig.
So when we think about obstacles on the spiritual path, most of us have probably heard or read that the primary obstacle to awakening is the ego. And since I'm going to talk quite a bit about ego, I want to just clarify right up front that, like many good terms, including many good spiritual terms, ego is a term that has been used in different ways by different people to mean different things. So when I use the word ego, you might have a certain set of reference points for what I'm talking about, but that might not really be what I'm talking about. And what's important here, as always, is not what the word means, because words don't mean anything. We all know that. Words are just, we assign meanings to them, we agree on meanings to them, but they don't have meaning. So if you don't like the way I'm using ego, that's not very important. We can agree. If I don't like the way you're using it, that we might say, you should use it this way, I should use it that way. We could argue. But at the end of the day, what's always important in any kind of discourse is defining your term the way you're going to use it and why, and then using it consistently. We agree? Okay. So just to say a word about how people have defined this word ego. And I'm not going to talk about every which way, but there are kind of two, in the sort of contemporary transformational community, let's call it, all of us who are practicing spiritual and psychological practices and teaching these kinds of things. There have kind of been two primary uses of the term ego. There's the one, it first came into popularity in contemporary, kind of educated Western culture through Sigmund Freud, and then elaborated on by his daughter Anna Freud, and then by many people in the psychoanalytic community, psychodynamic communities. But the kind of conception of ego in Western psychology broadly is that it is, and I'm going to do a very simple definition, so for any of you with PhDs in psychology who want to say, oh, Craig, you're butchering it, okay, maybe I am, and you can explain to me. But broadly speaking, the idea of ego in that kind of context is that it's a kind of functional center in the psyche that enables us to navigate the world, and particularly to navigate between two other parts of us and other parts of our psyche. So the basic conception is that we have our kind of raw impulses, our kind of instinctually driven behavior, our kind of animal instincts. And in Freudian psychology, that would be called the id. It's just kind of impulse, unrestrained impulse. And then on the other side, we have what they called our superego, which is kind of the internalized shoulds of the society of those we grant authority to. It's like your inner kind of conscience that says, oh, I should do this, I shouldn't do that. My parents wouldn't approve if I did this, or my teachers wouldn't approve, or so-and-so wouldn't approve. And it's the part of us that's trying to navigate, between, or that's the influence of society on our thinking and behavior and how that functions in our psyche. So this Freudian idea is you've got your instinctual impulses, which might be all kind, they might be, powerful lust that would compel you to just really act out wildly sexually if they weren't restrained, or, to powerfully just to eat everything you can see if you weren't restrained, or to be violent and aggressive when triggered if it wasn't restrained. So it's this kind of very just raw impulse. Imagine, just impulse was ruling the day, okay? Like it is for some animals. So, and we see how that works. So then they say that's, on the other hand, there's us all trying to be a good citizen internally, and be approved and get approved of by others. So we always want other people to think I'm okay, and what do they think I should do, and all those shoulds. And then the ego in Freud's conception is right in between those two. And it's the part of us that's centered. It's where your values and commitments live, where discipline lives, and it's your ability to make good, healthy, mature choices, to not just be ruled by your impulses, and also not just be ruled by the influence of others. Sure, your parents might have really wanted you to, go and be a doctor or a lawyer, to, use the cliche, but you knew in your heart you were an artist, and you couldn't do that because you had to follow, yourself, your own desires, your own potentials. And so you didn't just do what that superego told you to do. And, but you probably didn't do it violently and just say, screw all of you, I don't care, which might have been how your id would have responded, So it's like you've got this centered, healthy, mature ego who can discern, navigate between these two competing sides and find your way that's neither just what everyone else wants me to do or what my impulses are telling me to do. It's bigger, it holds it all and has a center to it. So that's the extent of my little Freud education on ego in Western psychology, and has a lot of other dimensions to it. But that's kind of broadly what that idea is. Now, in spiritual contexts, when we read spiritual books by enlightened masters, new and old, and we hear there's often been a translation of ancient spiritual texts into the word ego. They're talking about something that's been translated as ego. And certainly contemporary spiritually awakened people who aren't relying on ancient texts, who are just teaching, will use the word ego just to describe something that they're pointing to in their own experience. Now, in the spiritual context, the way ego is spoken about is, it's actually a little bit more like the way we often use it in common kind of just plain speech, right? Because in plain speech, how do we use ego? We say, oh, my boss has such a big ego, I can barely be in the room with them. They're just so full of themselves. Think they're the center of the universe. It's this kind of ego as this kind of pathological self-focus, self-image, especially image, right? Someone who's really full of themselves means they think the world of themselves. They think they're what it's all about, and they're the center of things, and their needs are what matters, and others don't, and they're, self-centered. Arrogance and self-centeredness really may be the two simplest ways. That's the kind of common colloquial use of ego. You can feel how that's very different from this Freudian conception, right? So the spiritual enlightenment way of talking about ego is much more like that. It's much more like the commonplace definition of it. So to make it really simple, in an enlightenment context, when we hear we have to transcend the ego, or we hear that the ego is the obstacle to the spiritual path, what we're talking about is, most simply put, it's your self-image. It's your story about yourself. It's your self-concept. But not just the concept or the image, it's your emotional investment in your self-image, your attachment to it, your defense of it. So to just feel what that is in yourself for a second, we all are different, and each of us has a different kind of self-image or self-concept. Some of us are very identified with being smart, intelligent. Often people who are smart and intelligent get identified with that because that's how they've been rewarded and found their success. So they feel like, I'm really smart. I'm the smartest person in the room. I know everything. And they're often making all kinds of mistakes because they think they know things that they don't, right? We meet people like that. Oh, he just thinks he knows everything, And so that self-image is very wound up in being smart. For someone else, it might be around their physical prowess. Someone who's strong and athletic has identified as, I'm strong and athletic, and I'm super physically capable, and maybe even physically beautiful and attractive. Look at me. And we know what it's like when we meet people who have a big self-image about their physical appearance. You can kind of feel it when you encounter them. They are very aware. One other person might be attractive, but doesn't seem that focused on it. You meet someone else very attractive, and they feel very aware of it, and they want you to be aware of it. And it's a very, that's where their ego has constructed itself around. The self-image has, coalesced around that quality or capacity. And for some of us, it might be that we're a really ethical, good person. Often people who are doing spiritual work like this have a self-image as being very good, very ethical, very kind, very loving. And I want to say our self-image could be built around the opposite of those, because, let's say we're not that intelligent or smart, but we're really an ethical, good, kind person. And we kind of know that about ourselves. So then our self-image would probably include, oh, I'm not that smart. So then, if someone asked a question, as a group of us together, and somebody asked a question, we might be somebody who never brings forth our answer because we don't think we're the smart one. And so we turn to the person that we think is the smart one. What do you think? What I think doesn't matter because I'm not that smart. You see how ego now has a story that I'm not very smart, and it then guides all this behavior. The not speaking up, not sharing my thoughts and reflections and opinions because mine aren't that valuable because I'm not that smart. So then my life choices end up emanating from my self-image, whether it's negative or positive. And most of us have some positive parts and some negative parts. I'm great at these things. I'm not these things. So ego is kind of like, I'm this and I'm not that. I'm this and I'm not that. And it creates a story And then the important part is it's the investment in the story. That's really the ego part. And the reason I'm saying that is because this is very important. There's often a confusion. It's sort of like when I'm asking us to go beyond our story or go beyond our self-image, people will say, well, but I do know things about myself. I've been alive for 50 years, 60 years. I know a lot about. I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm not good at. I know where I've made big mistakes in life. I know where I've really excelled. You telling me to pretend I don't know that? No, this isn't about denying anything you know about yourself, but it's about not being invested in anything you think you know about yourself. See that, because here, and this will get clear. I'm sure it's not yet, but it'll get clear why in a moment. So when we talk about ego as the obstacle to the path and as what we need to transcend, what we're really talking about is not what you know about yourself. It's your need on an emotional, psychological level, a level of investment and attachment. It's your need to have a story about yourself. It's your need to have an image of yourself in your mind that you are sustaining, preserving, maintaining. It's that need to see myself. That's the ego. Now, one of the easiest ways, therefore, to actually experience your own ego and to go, oh, that's my ego. There it is. Now I see what he's talking about, is just think about a time when somebody challenged your self-image. So we'll take a concrete example. Let's say you have that, as a lot of us do here, I'm sure you have a self-image of being a very good, kind, caring, loving, selfless person, somebody who's really out for the greater good in life, not just out for yourself. That wouldn't be spiritual. The spiritual ego, the ego of the spiritual practitioner very often is I'm good and kind and nice and loving, some variation on that. So, and it might be a lot of truth in that relative to other people on the planet. But what happens when someone sort of accuses you of doing something selfish or something aggressive or something mean, saying you were triggered by some event and you made some comment about someone that was kind of mean because you were emotionally triggered, and then it happened and everybody felt it. And then one of your friends takes you aside and says, that was kind of mean what you said, so or that seemed kind of self-centered what you did. And so what I want you to draw your attention to is that feeling you get in that moment. Because it's a very specific kind of feeling. It's the feeling of, it's not shame, that's different. That might be related, but it's more the feeling of wanting to defend your self-image and say, and it kind of goes like this. No, I didn't mean to be mean. I didn't mean to be, that wasn't my intent. I accidentally, that slipped out, or, I was emotionally triggered and I know I just said that, but I didn't really mean, I'm not that person. I'm not, you feel this endless protestation, but I'm not a bad person. I'm not a mean person, not a selfish person. And it's this desperate attempt inside the psyche to maintain the self-image. That's all that matters right then. It's because it's incoming threat to the story about me that we've constructed and defended. And now that's a potential something's going to break through the defense system and reveal that we're not the perfect, nice, kind, good person we're convinced of. We're maybe sometimes do something that's kind of mean or kind of self-centered or whatever it is, but something that's not quite in line with the perfect story. And all this machination goes on inside the self. Outwardly, it goes out as kind of defense, some story of defense of my good name. I'm misunderstood. It's not what happened. Not what I meant to have happen. But it's I can't see myself that way. You see, that's the basic thing. I know I can't see myself that way. It can't be me. I can't be right because I'm this way. Or people who are identified with being smart and intelligent and having all the answers when they sometimes, assert something and then it's quickly revealed to be wrong in front of everybody, or even just one-to-one. It's like, no, actually, these days we have Google, so this happens all the time, right? Someone asserts something really strongly. Oh, the population of the U.S. is 290 million. Someone Googled it. No, it's 320. I don't know what it is exactly, but that they and then that person who is identified with being smart feels like, well, they need a reason why they were wrong. I accidentally looked at the wrong year when I learned that, or there's again, it's all about the defense of the existing self-image. All the maintenance system that kicks into place to try to preserve it when it's threatened. And by the way, it doesn't mean someone else has to reveal it to us. If we just do something that contradicts our self-image, that will also impact us. If we have a self-image of being somebody who's really good with money and makes good decisions, and then we invest a bunch of our money in something that completely falls apart. A lot of people have had this experience in their life. They made a big investment, something that completely went south, and they lost a lot of money. And, there's whole inner project, how did I have such bad judgment? And rather than kind of look and see, oh, well, I wanted to believe it was true because I was kind of feeling greedy and had thought I could make big money on that thing. And I ignored important data, and I really took too big of a risk. And rather than this kind of honest self-reflection growth process where we really see the things we did wrong, it turns to, oh, that person swindled me. I believed them and they lied. So again, just little examples here of kind of how the self-image operates, what disrupts it, how we defend it. And there I was touching on, obviously, some of the pathology that gets involved in having a self-image that we're invested in. That last example I started to give. And anyway, we'll talk more about that now. But so just take a second to just be with that aspect of the psyche, whether you want to call it ego or not, whether it, just this function, the self-image preservation, the attachment to knowing who I am, to having a story, for good or for bad. Then we're going to talk about why that's an obstacle on the path. Actually, before I talk about why it's an obstacle on the path, I want to just say one more thing, which is kind of my pet theory as to why, maybe it's a possible theory of why and how this pathology came into being. The pathology being this desperate need to see myself as this, that, and the other thing, to know my story, to have a self-concept and self-image that I defend. So if you think about it in evolutionary terms, we all know that from the beginning of time, all animals have had a survival instinct. And it predates animals. I think, the very earliest organisms probably had some kind of survival instinct. And certainly in the emotional lives of animals, the mental emotional lives of emerging animals, the survival instinct, in our biology, to rapidly learn what can kill me, what's a threat, and avoid those threats at all costs. So we know that this survival instinct is arguably the deepest instinct in our DNA. So as life is progressing and as human consciousness is progressing along through the long arc of evolution, somewhere along the way, we know that self-reflexive consciousness emerged. Now, what all that means is consciousness that could reflect on itself. meaning people became self-aware. Person became capable of having a concept of self. Instead of just being an organism who's just having a pure experience of being alive, just one thing to the next. You're an organism and you're just trying to find food, trying to find warmth, trying to stay safe, trying to find food, trying to find warmth, trying to mate, trying to stay safe, just one moment to the next, just living and following the impulses that protect me and keep it all going. One step beyond that, and you had this organism that started to go, oh, I'm a self. This is me. I have things I want, things I don't want. I like this. I don't like that. I don't know how it all unfolded, really. I'm not going to go too far. But whatever point, this ability to have an image of the self in the mind, to think about one's own self and go, oh, I'm Craig. Probably wasn't Craig back now, though it might have been, because my name originates from people who dwelled in crags. It means crag dweller. So maybe I have a very early name. I don't know. But probably not. But anyway, the point is, we got this ability to have a concept of the self in the mind. And what I think must have happened is that the survival instinct, which up to that point, the survival instinct had been doing one thing: preserving your body, your life, your survival of your body, so that your genes could carry on, etc., so that you could keep it going. But now and that was the self. The self was just the body, and the survival instinct was trying to preserve it, protect it. Now, this other kind of self emerges. It's a self in the mind. A mental self starts to have a story about it, starts to have a world that it's building up around the self in the mind. And my best guess is that at that point, the survival instinct latched onto that mental self and just assumed that it needed protecting too. It needed defending too, just like the physical body. And so we ended up with this new entity inside us, which was the survival instinct trying to preserve the self-concept and the self-story, the self-image. And that over time became what we, in a spiritual context, are calling the ego. This kind of what's now, and again, it probably wasn't pathological initially, or it wouldn't have been selected for in evolution. So I'm sure it served a function, and that would be a conversation for another day. But if you can just kind of simply see how this pathology has emerged, that now there's an unnecessary impulse to defend the self-image, to keep it intact, to sustain it, maintain it, preserve it, keep it intact. So why is this such a big problem on a path of growth and awakening? Well, for one thing, awakening is about the discovery of consciousness without limits, of a self without limits. It's the discovery that what we are is much vaster than our mind can contain. That who and what we are really exists beyond the mind. We don't live in the mind. We are the conscious. The mind arises within us. We are this vast, infinite consciousness and mind and thought and all stories. The whole world of concepts just is something that's arising within this vastness that we are. So if we're attached to a small little story of self, that I'm this and I'm not that, I'm this and I'm not that, and that's like what we're invested in maintaining, there's no room and there's no way for us to really open to and let go into the enormity of the super consciousness that is our true nature, that is so vast and limitless that we can't know it with the mind. That's a basic truth of enlightenment. Your mind can't know it. Your mind won't go there, but you can if you go beyond the mind. So this self-story or self-concept, from the point of view of awakened consciousness, this self-story or self-concept is just incredibly limited. It's this tiny little story about this tiny little life, this person that we thought we were, that was made up of these particular events and stories and choices and ambitions and needs and craving. It's our little story inside this infinite ocean of being and depth. The second reason ego is a big obstacle to awakening is that awakening, we use the term awakening, frankly, because it has this quality of waking up. But waking up from what? Waking up from illusion, waking up from delusion, waking up from distorted perceptions and distorted ideas. We've all heard and we all feel that our spiritual path is a path toward truth, meaning alignment with truth, meaning not someone else's truth, but with what actually is reality. Let's just say reality, since truth can be a triggering word. It's a drive toward the real, and we are waking up from the unreal into the real. Which means practically, because that can sound esoteric or metaphysical, but I mean it practically, it's waking up to where we can now see the way things are. We now have a chance to be in touch with what's happening right in front of us, to perceive other people's motives accurately, to see situations and dangers and threats and opportunities for what they are. So many human beings can't accurately perceive opportunities. They can't accurately assess threats. Vast volumes have been written on all of our cognitive biases that distort the truth about things, distort reality for all of us. Hundreds of cognitive biases that are part of all this. Awakening is waking up out of bias. Ideally, ultimately, coming into the ability to really be with things as they are, perceive them as they are. At least, it doesn't mean you have superpowers to see through everything, but at least to not be actively distorting reality. So if you got the picture of what ego was up above, you could feel all the distorting mechanisms in it. What are called ego defenses are all mechanisms for distorting reality. So any delusion, any limited story that we're invested in and defending is going to make it nearly impossible for us to start to face the truth, align with the truth, come into reality, begin to live in reality, not in our mind stories about it, not in our false biased perceptions about it. There's another reason, the third reason that ego is such a huge obstacle to awakening. So another way of understanding awakening is that what we're awakening to is what's been called the good, which means a deeper moral center. Spiritual awakening is a moral awakening. It's awakening to a deeper knowing. It's basically awakening to an alignment with what are the actions that would bring about the greatest good, that would be an expression of love coming into the world, that would be an expression of love and wisdom coming into the world. What's been called the moral axis of the cosmos. The ability to sense and know right action, meaning, which doesn't mean there's only one right thing to do in every moment. It means what's the best thing that could be done in every moment to my best of my ability to perceive it. How do I do what's truly good? Not just what feels good, not just what seems good to my distorted, conditioned mind. Someone's asking you for help, but they might need a very different kind of help than they're asking for. If you have the ability to see what it would be to truly be helpful. Teach a man to fish, not just give him a fish. Maybe. In another circumstance, hey, they need a fish because right now they're about to starve. How do we perceive what's truly good and right? By not having biased, distorted perceptions about it, and by being aligned with that good. We can't really be aligned with the greater good when our fundamental driver is the ego, which is what? It's out for itself. It's about preserving itself. Very hard to be someone who really cares and can live a life of true care for the greater good. Even if it's hard to know in every moment what the greater good is, I'm not implying that you have super knowledge of the greatest good in every moment that's always right. It's not that. But it's about removing all barriers to an alignment with the good, with the moral axis of the cosmos, to live a truly ethical life by the highest possible standard. So, the ego makes this so hard, and here's why. Not just even because it's selfish, but to truly be a really good person, a really ethical person, moral person, we have to be willing to face our potential to not be a good person at all. Wise people throughout the ages have always known this and have always said this. The path to being good is very much about seeing everything about you that's not very good and keeping that in view so that it doesn't run the show of your life. So if you've got a self-image of being good, you're in real trouble. Because how are you going to see everything in you that's not so good? All the impulses toward, self-preservation, selfishness, greed, you getting what you want at the expense of another. That's here's the point. All of those more primitive kind of self-centered instincts exist in every one of us. They're part of the universal human condition. Now, any one of us, you can look at our life and say, well, this person really is aligned with the better angels of their nature. They really make choices consistently that are putting the greatest good first and not what's good for them or their tribe or their family or, their future benefit. They're really out for trying to do it. And another person, you can see, wow, that person's just brutally self-centered and, doesn't seem to care about anybody but themselves. And wow, so I'm saying there are massive relative differences between us. But the person who can really find a way to align with the highest in all of us is the person who can face all of the darkest corners of the psyche, all of the darkest impulses within us, because they're in all of us. But they're so hard they're impossible to face if we have a self-image that does not include them. If they're not in your story of what's possible for you, you're not going to see it. And then you won't be able to really be good. You have a self-image of being good. You'll try to be good, but then you'll still do all these things and it will all be fairly superficial. You convinced that ego might be a problem yet? I've got a few more to go. The fourth one is that spiritual awakening is about not just waking up to a greater reality, but it requires us to surrender to something beyond the mind. There's an emergent flow of living in free, full-hearted, loving, caring, wise response to the moment that we have to surrender to that greater consciousness and allow ourselves to let go of control. Up until now, we may have controlled our life very well, predicted it, controlled it, and gotten somewhere with our life and been successful. But as we progress on the spiritual path, we start to realize, for the real thing to happen, for this awakened consciousness to become the center stage of my life, to get into the driver's seat of my life, so that's where I'm living from now, I really have to let go of my personal agendas, my personal need to control, my story about how everything's supposed to go, my insistence on having it go a certain way. I have to let that go. But ego manifests as a strong desire to stay in control, to keep feeling safe and okay, and I got this, and I'm in control. And that's part of why it's got that whole self-image. Again, it's maybe more than I can get into now, but it's all woven together. It's trying to keep everything in control and okay, and even just keep a belief that we're in control. It doesn't even have to be in control. It just has to think we're in control so that we can feel okay about ourselves and where we're at in life. So the point is, ego can't, let's make it really simple. Awakening calls us to surrender to something bigger, to a deeper part of ourselves. Ego can't. Ego can't surrender. Ego holds on forever until we surrender and shift our alignment, really. The fifth reason ego is a barrier to spiritual awakening is that awakening isn't just a static state of consciousness. Some of us have maybe thought it was in the past, on spiritual path. We're trying to get to some place with just peace and quiet and joy, peace, quiet, and bliss. And it's just a static place we get, and we sit there, and life is just peaceful now and content and happy. But that's not what awakening's really about. It might be an occasional byproduct, but awakening ultimately opens us up to our nature as an evolutionary process. The universe is an evolutionary process. It's not a bunch of stuff that's going through an evolutionary process. It's evolution itself. Evolution is in motion, moving through everything. We human beings are at our optimized best when we're in a state of constant growth and development. People are happiest when they're learning and growing, right? We can all see that in ourselves. Often people forget that. They kind of keep their life small for a while. They don't change and grow that much. And then suddenly they take a course and they suddenly feel the movement forward. I don't mean just a spiritual course, but any kind of, just growth, learning. And they go, oh, wow, I'm learning again. I feel so alive. New things are happening. I'm improving. So our nature is to grow and evolve and develop freely. And awakening frees us to just be a fluid, dynamic participant in the evolutionary process. But the ego wants nothing to do with any of that. The ego's job, if you can feel it by now, is to preserve the status quo, to keep something intact. No, I can't. I have to keep this self-image intact. And by the way, I'm talking about the self-image, but there's a bunch of other things that cluster around the self-image. They have to do with your beliefs about the world, your beliefs about other people. There's like a whole kind of worldview paradigm, belief system that is all in orbit around the self-image, and then the attachment to keeping your worldview and your beliefs intact about everything are all woven into this ego structure. This whole thing that's, ego's trying to keep it all intact. That's why we also get very triggered if somebody says something that challenges our worldview. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. It's not how I thought things were. So ego's a barrier to this life of dynamic growth and change and fluidity. Now, this is a program primarily about meditation. So let's take a look at how this shows up in meditation. How does the ego attempt to block our profound meditation? So you may have heard people talk about resistance in meditation, or you may have experienced something that you felt, oh, this is resistance. It's like you sit down to meditate, you're very intentional about it, you're doing the practice, and then all this stuff starts coming up in your meditation to make it really difficult to meditate. Maybe a lot of insecurity or fear just comes up, or some people experience intense agitation, like they just want to jump up and run out of the room, almost get out of their clothes, get out of their skin, this agitation. There can be feelings of overwhelm, just overwhelmed by just sitting with what is, just being here with what is as I am, feels just overwhelming to my system. Or many of us experience the kind of movement toward distraction in meditation. Just, I'm here, I really want to meditate, but I'm really just going off and planning my weekend, or I'm really just trying to solve that problem at work. I'm not really bringing myself to it, no matter how much I intend to. There's just this gravitational pull of distraction. Resistance also shows up as kind of doubt and cynicism about the possibility, or about ourselves, about our own ability to do it. How many of you have had that? I guess maybe I'm not cut out for meditation. I can't seem to sit still. I can't seem to not be distracted. Oh, maybe there really isn't anything here for me. Maybe there's nothing here at all. It's kind of doubtfulness. These are all forms of ego resistance. The ego churns it all up to try to to get you to stop meditating or to make your meditation miserable and not go anywhere. There are also ways, kind of ego obstacles to meditation, that have to do with knowing and grasping, because that's also the nature of ego. It's trying to know, trying to have a clear picture and grasp on. So it can have control. So like having expectations of your meditation. Like, I know what should be happening, and this isn't it. I know what should be happening in meditation. I should be feeling calm, peaceful, happy. I'm not, so this isn't it. All these expectations that we bring to our meditation. That's the ego wanting in on your meditation. It's all it is. Ego wants a piece. Okay, you're going to meditate. How do I get in on the action? I'm going to impose a bunch of expectations on it. So I got control of this thing now. Attachment to having deep states in meditation, or powerful experiences. In other words, attachment to concrete results that the ego can get. The ego is the one who wants concrete results out of your meditation. Sorry to say. It's the one that wants to have it be a certain way, feel a certain way, and get to a certain place that it now has control over. Just to be clear, everyone, all of the direct awakening practices are practices that are helping to unwind, get underneath, bypass all of this ego mechanism I've been speaking about. They are designed to do that. They do that. So it's not like you have to go, oh my God, I've been doing all this meditation. Now I have to do some whole other thing called ego practice. But fundamentally, we're already on the path that is going beyond everything I'm talking about. We can also experience a lot of impatience in our meditation. When is this going to get really cool? When is this going to get really exciting? Again, it's your ego. Come on, give me something here. I want something for me Why? To show me that I'm doing it right. So I can have a self-image of being someone who's meditating right. So I know how I'm doing. Ego in meditation, a lot of it is I want to know how I'm doing because I'm trying to see myself in the meditation and I can't do it very well. So how am I doing? Am I doing it right? Where's a sign? I need a sign that I'm doing it right. So I can see myself doing it right. So I know, I got this. I'm a good meditator. I'm doing it right. Also shows up as frustration with the process not giving me what I want. It also shows up as a kind of stubbornness. Stubbornness is a very clear face of ego. Not in everything in life. It's good to be stubborn about certain things. It's good to be stubbornly not accepting compromise in the world and not accepting forward progress. We should be very stubborn about that. But the stubbornness I'm talking about in meditation is the stubborn refusal to actually do the practice in the way it's been designed. Sound familiar, anyone? I don't know. Probably, hopefully not everyone. But, there'll be this thing where like there's a very simple meditation instruction, like just let things be as they are. And then there's this stubbornness that's like, well, he's saying let things be as they are, but it must really mean I need to relax and I shouldn't have these thoughts here. So I need to calm my mind down and I need to relax because then maybe I can let things be as they are. So it's a kind of stubborn insistence on staying in control instead of just doing the very simple practice that's laid out that might have a chance at unwinding this. So it also shows up like that. And many other ways. I'm sure we could all compare notes and come up with a long list. But essentially, my goal here has been to just give you this broad territory because spiritual freedom really is, from one point of view, it's freedom from ego. It's awakening beyond ego. It's the discovery of who and what we are when we don't know who or what we are. I would argue we can only really be who we are when we aren't imposing any idea of who we are. When we aren't carrying the weight of the ego around, there's this freedom and lightness. When we aren't needing to know who we are, we're kind of discover what's possible. We're discovering who we are in each moment and who we can be. And it's evolving and changing. It's not static anymore like our story was. And we're not trying to make up a new story. We're just staying with we're in a life of discovery now. What is possible for this human being that I seem to be? Who can I be now? What can come forth now? What new capacity? What new discovery? What new consciousness? What new response will emerge from my open, liberated consciousness? It's no longer embedded in a story about me. Now, when we make a mistake or we, problems revealed that we had some part of, our energy is completely liberated to address it and learn from it. We're just like, whoa, what did I do wrong? What happened? What was the bad judgment here? Let's see what we could do better next time. There's no need to maintain and manage the self-image. Oh no, maybe I'm not as smart as I thought. Oh no, maybe I'm not as capable as I thought. Oh, what did I get? It's not about you. There's no need for it to be about you. It's just about what's happening, how we're all doing. How do we do better? Liberated, free, engaged, evolving, unhooked. That's the possibility it's pointing to.
If today's episode has you curious about what you can do to break free from the grip of the ego, you're invited to tune into a 90-minute online workshop Craig will be hosting called The Key to Evolving Beyond Ego: How to Make the Change That Changes Everything. In this workshop, he'll share essential tools and practices that have helped thousands make the leap out of ego and into the kind of spiritual life they've always sensed is possible. Register for free at evolvebeyondego.com. That's evolvebeyondego.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, we hope you'll share our show with others. And please subscribe and rate us wherever you listen to your favorite shows. If you have a minute to write a short review on your podcast app, we would deeply appreciate your support. You can stay connected to the show by subscribing to our newsletter at meditationchangeseverything.com. Each week, we'll send you new audios and videos from Craig, and we'll also let you know when we release new episodes of the show. For a deeper experience of Craig's approach to meditation, consider joining our Awakened Life membership program. Each month, you'll receive in-depth teachings and guidance, including a meditation workshop, 4 guided meditations, and a live online retreat with Craig. And when you register today, you can receive your first month for 50% off. Go to awakenedlifemembership.com to learn more and enroll. That's awakenedlifemembership.com. Check out our show notes for links to all the ways you can stay in touch with Craig's work. Meditation Changes Everything is created by Craig Hamilton, Susan Fries, Mason Ewald, Stephanie Murphy, Will Bowman, and Richard Klein. From all of us, thank you for tuning in.